Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get this shit started. Thank you everybody for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. Hope you all enjoyed the previous episode with Emma Williams. Learned a lot about storyboarding, and I had no idea about any of that stuff, so it's always cool to check in with people in different industries and whatnot. But I want to welcome today a brand new guest, and we're going to talk about her book, her brand new book, and how that came together. I want to welcome to the podcast for the very first time, Miss Solany Lara. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Bright sunny day, and so I'm just looking forward to enjoying this summer. It's starting. It was pretty gloomy for a while here in Los Angeles, but it's finally becoming like summer, and so definitely feeling that heat. I know it's gonna get worse, which I'm not excited about, but it is what it is. Try to enjoy it.
Yeah. I'm not feeling that heat at all. I prefer if it'd be like 50 degrees all year long, but that's just me.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way. But gotta do what you gotta do and try to enjoy it here and there, you know? If I could stay indoors all day, I would.
Absolutely.
Probably reading.
Now, kind of unique here, you know, you're not the first Lara on the podcast, right? I had your sister on very early on in the infancy of the podcast when I was kind of testing things out. So those of you that have been listening for a while, I think episode like 15 or something with Solany Lara and her fitness stuff. But this is another Lara.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's a completely different topic for sure.
Absolutely. Well, you know, so I want to welcome you and thank you for being on. And, you know, when I saw the news that, you know, you'd written a book of poems, right? I immediately asked your sister, like, you know, hey, do you think she'd be interested in being on the podcast? I'm like, that's a really cool, you know, accomplishment, you know, something that I could really kind of dig into and talk about, you know, as far as like your motivation behind it. And so your book is titled Hija De Mi Padre, right?
Yes.
And so I kind of know a little bit, you know, the backstory about that, but I want you to tell it in your own story. How did that come to be?
Well, you know, it's my dad, basically, if I put it in simple terms. But what about my dad? You know, he passed away 4 years ago. And so that was really hard. But I didn't really give my chance to like process his death. Because, you know, I don't know, for me personally, when I went through my father's death and grieving him, I kind of just dived deep into work. I didn't give my chance to like just pause and take it all in. I was just like, you know what? This happened. I'm just going to suppress everything and just get back to life because I felt like that was a way to deal with it. And just continue on, right? And so I was going out as much as possible, like try to keep my like mind off of it, only to like then be faced with the pandemic. And that pandemic, I'm sure like plenty of people and can relate, but you know, being alone kind of just made things resurface again in a way that I was like, I clearly did not process my father's death like I thought I did. And there was still so much more healing to do. And so I knew that I needed to do that healing because during the pandemic, I was just, I still live with Corali. We live with my mom and, you know, just continue to stay with my mom after my dad passed away. And so through that, I was just like angry, like all the time. Like I was angry. I was always arguing with my entire family, not just my mom and Corali, but the rest of my sisters, my significant other. And I was just like, where is all this anger coming from? Like, why am I so angry? Why is this happening? At one point, I felt like truly like running away, like just running away and escaping. But I thought that was not logical.
Right.
And then I really was like, we're in the pandemic, and I think it was around 2021 when like things were starting to get kind of better. People were starting to get back into life, and the end of 2021, right? And reopening things again. Although there was people still like iffy about going out, but I was just like, you know what? Like, I know things are still not back to norm, and COVID is a possibility. But if I continue to like stay put in this house, like I'm just going to go crazy. And like I just decided one day, I saw on Instagram a writing retreat with Davina Ferreira, who is the CEO of my the publishing company that published my book, Alegria Publishing. And I was like, you know what? Like, I had this like breakdown yesterday. I know things are not right internally. I need to do something for myself, ignore everybody else, like whatever, like, even if they're not okay with me stepping out because COVID, right?
Right.
I'll wear my mask, be as careful as I could be. But I was just like, I need this because I truly felt like I was just going through like a mental health crisis, pretty much. And so with the writing retreat, I would say like during the pandemic, I felt, no, actually after my dad's death, I just didn't feel like myself at all. Like it was weird. Like I just didn't feel like myself. Yes, I was doing the rhythm of life, going to work, going out, doing all the things, right? And then the pandemic hit. I think the pandemic just kind of was like, no social.
Beat a lot of people up. Yeah.
Yeah, like I wasn't able to be around people to kind of mask the emotions, so they were resurfacing again. And so from there I was just like who am I? Like who am I without my dad? Who am I without like, even all these pressures of like the world? And I just couldn't find a sense of myself. So when I went to the writing retreat, I would say like that writing retreat made me, I don't know, just kind of see myself again, like a little bit of myself again. And I was just like, dang, like writing, like I need this, like I really need to write, because I feel like if I don't do this, I don't think I'm gonna come out of the other side. Like I was in a dark place. And so that day I kind of just, I really enjoyed the writing retreat. But then I don't know if immediately after, I can't really pinpoint when I decided to say, I'm going to write a book. I think it was either immediately after or like the week of that I was just like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book because I need this. I need to heal. I need to put my thoughts on paper. I need to just do this for myself first. And so, yeah, that's where it came from.
And that's, it's really interesting, because I think a lot of people, and I'm not going to put us all in a box here, right? But a lot of people with, parents, and I'm going to say this from my experience, from like Mexico and stuff like that, we don't know how to deal with grief, right? We're always just taught to like, get back to normal, get back on track, go to work. And, when you and your family were going through your loss with, with your dad, I don't know if you know this, I don't know how much your sister talked about, hey, what's going on at work, but 10 days prior to that, I had lost my brother, right? And so it was very close in time frame there, and I was the same way. I was just the very next day after I got the news, I was at work on time doing my thing. I didn't feel good, right? But I'm still just trying to mask all of these emotions that you feel. And, I didn't know how to grieve. I've never had to grieve something like that, so I can definitely relate to that because, you want to get back on track. You want to get back to normal, but it really doesn't work. And I'm still not at a point where I feel like I've properly grieved, but you found your outlet, and you found what started to make you feel like you again. Right. And so you just decided, hey, I'm just going to go all in. I'm just going to do this. Right.
Yes.
And when you do something like that, you go in kind of blind. Right. And so like the process is like, where do I start? Right. How do I get this done? I have the end goal. I know what I want to do. Right. But what are the steps in between? So, talk to me about figuring that out, because I can't even, begin to think, where do I start if I want to write a book?
Definitely. I would say that community is really important. I with social media, like honestly, for a while, like I felt like I had to do things alone to get somewhere. I don't know if it was social media. I don't know if it's like, I don't know what it is, but I do feel like here in the United States, it's very like, be independent, do your things on your own. Sometimes you're gonna have to like not be around family, right, to do these things, and you can be with your friends, or like I just feel like I see that a lot on social media. Like,
yeah,
you gotta focus on yourself and be by yourself.
Like being that self-made person, kind of like,
yeah.
And what it is bullshit. Honestly,
it is, because I would say like, if I didn't have community, I probably wouldn't have been able to write this book at all. And what I mean by community, yes, I had my alone time, right? Because writing is a very like internal process. And sometimes you do have to be alone to reflect. A lot of times you do. But in the sense of community of like, my family really provided that space for me to be able to just be like, okay, she's not feeling well. We're going to give her that space. She has a deadline to meet. What can we do to help her? She's going to school. Like, what can I do to like make it easier for her? I think once they saw that I was really going through it, like they were just very understanding, like, okay, let's not put too much pressure on Solany right now, because she's really going through it right now and she needs our support. And so I really felt supported in that way, where I might have not been around my family as much because I was, focusing on work. I have a full-time job as an educator, and I was also focusing on school. Like, I wrote this book while going to grad school as well. It's a crazy thing, right? Now that I wrap my head around it, I'm like, shit, like I really, was doing a lot for a person, but like I knew that I needed to write the book, because sometimes I would be met with that too from my family, like, maybe you're doing too much. And I'm just yeah, I mean, I could see why it was seen that way, but it was more of like out of a need for me. But they understood. And so I think because they were very supportive of like, she has a lot on her plate. Once they saw that I was going through it, right? It kind of changed even our relationship too. Like, they were just like more understanding in a lot of sense. Like, she's not in a very good place right now. She's processing all these things. And, her processing might look different from ours because we don't write or we don't talk about our feelings.
Right.
But it really, like, I don't know, improved our relationship in a lot of ways, because once they saw that I was like processing my dad's death, it kind of opened the doors to even have conversation about my dad too. A lot of times, like, I'd be like, I wrote this poem today, and I just talked to my mom about it, and then like all of a sudden we were like processing my dad's death together. The same with Corali, right? And so I think in a way, community is really important in that sense. Not just with my family, but I also found community in Alegria Publishing, which Alegria Publishing really centers around publishing the work of BIPOC communities. And the majority are Latinos. And so
sorry, real quick, may I ask, what is, for those of us unfamiliar, what is BIPOC?
Brown, indigenous, people of color. So it really centers around like trying to get the work out of like those that you usually don't see in publishing, because we only make, I want to say, like a very small percentage of writers that are actually published. And so Alegría Publishing tries to get work published by Latinos, by people of color, and just to get them on the shelves. And so when I went to the writing retreat with Davina, I really love that she was trying to get more Latinos published because she knew there was a need. And through that, she made it in a way where it's like she really walks you through the motions of publishing a book. So in those 2 years, I was actually attending workshops weekly, which helped me in terms of like staying accountable to have work at these workshops, and having them be open to critique and feedback. And so I don't think if I wouldn't have had that to begin with, I don't think I would have probably published my book as fast as I did, or I probably wouldn't have felt like I probably would have been like very lost in the process. And so I think having those, weekly workshops where I met with like other writers that were also working on their books really provided that, like, not only the safe space because the majority were Latino, so they understood where I was coming from, but also provided like accountability as well, and then a space where like I could get my questions answered too.
Yeah, so, very cool. Like, you learned along the way, right? And it was, even more, impactful for you because it ties in culturally, right? And that's really a really cool thing to go through. Now, from what I understand, your book is essentially, a collection of poems, right? And other than being like a big, tribute to your dad and whatnot, it seems like there's it's from what I've seen so far. There's like a lot of like you in there as well, like like reflecting on yourself. Now, when talking about though, like the tribute to your dad, I've heard little bits and pieces about him. When your sister would talk about him, I heard about him being like the life of the party.
Oh yeah.
I heard about his old truck in the metal. And I heard about that legendary birria as well.
Oh, right? Yeah. That birria. So good.
Now, yeah, I bet. Now, I want to know, like how difficult was it really getting personal? Because I watched your video of your, of the event that you had, and, some of the stuff you have on Instagram, I was able to listen to or read. And in some of these things, you get pretty personal, right? Like, I think in one of your poems, you mentioned how, your dad was frustrated because he wasn't the breadwinner of the house anymore, right? And so something like that, it can be maybe misinterpreted by family, or they'll be like, why are you talking about that, or anything like that, right? So how hard was it getting like that personal and digging that deep?
I mean, I think for me, I would say there was some fear at first, and hesitancy, because I think if I would like go back to how I started writing and like the poems at the beginning that I was writing, I didn't really go deep in that way. I just, it was more of like the poems that I wrote were more like remembrance of my dad, and like being very like kind of honored, like being his daughter. Not that I'm not honored, right? But I think as like children, of our parents, like it's very easy to focus on like the dark stuff, right? And it's funny because I didn't focus on the dark stuff at first, right? But I would say, like, and I always say this, like, everybody has their lightness and darkness. Like, everybody has their good and their bad side. And my dad had both his good and his bad side, right? Which we saw a lot growing up. great father, but he definitely had his flaws, right? He
Mm-hmm.
grew up in a traditional Mexican family with 11 siblings total. And I think when you grow up, in a traditional Mexican family, you grow up with certain ideas and ideals and just certain very traditional way of thinking.
Yeah.
And so that carried over from Mexico to the United States. Like it stayed with him. And so I would say like that was like our like butting heads all the time. Like we would butt heads all the time while he was alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of anger towards him. I would say like growing up, like once I had like, my own like mind or like my own thought process, you reach a certain point where you're like, this is not okay. The way my dad is treating us, or the way he's like making like minimizing things, or like he's belittling me at certain times, right? And there's a certain point where you get there and you're like, you question your parents, you start questioning them. And so once I started doing that, I don't remember what age, I like started holding a lot of grudges towards my dad, like a lot of rancor towards him. And I'd say like our relationship kind of was not the best prior to him passing away. And I think a lot of it was like guilt after he passed away, because I was like, I held up so much darkness towards him, and when I should have been giving the light to him because he needed it the most then. And I think those were the feelings that I was like really holding back from touching on. And I think it was out of fear. Like I would say it was out of fear, because you're like this is some hard stuff to process. So I kind of held back a little at first. But like I said, community is really important, right? And so the workshops, Davina, whenever she would see glimpses of it, she's like, you might want to go in there deeper and like process that and see if there's something that comes out of it. And that's when I was like I know that's gonna be hard, and I think part of me doesn't want to process that. And like I even said it, I think during workshop, like I don't know if people are ready to see that. Like, and then a lot of times, like when I did, dive into that deep, yes, there was like heavy feelings, like crying even while I wrote the poems, crying, and like my mom seeing me and being like, what's wrong? And a lot of that. But after I did it, like I felt so much lighter, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. You let so much off your shoulders at that point. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. And so I felt it, and it kind of just was kind of like building momentum, because after that, like I just started, going deeper and deeper and deeper. And yes, it was hard, but I would say if I wouldn't have done that, like I probably wouldn't be where I'm at now. I probably wouldn't be as confident as I am now, because prior to writing the book, I was a very shy person, very closed off, very like, like I have all these gifts, like but I don't know if I'm ready to share it with the world. Like I was very that person, like scared. And so until I wrote the book and until I dove deep, I think that's where I would, and I describe it in this sense in the book. I started shining brighter, like even brighter than I had felt in the past. And so I think, yes, it's hard going into those, shadows, but it's needed to be able to come out of the other side and shine brighter than like I was before. That's the only way we could describe it.
And it makes complete sense, right? Because in order to pay, proper tribute, to your father, you got to give the whole, right?
Oh yeah.
You're not just going to paint a picture of like, he was the perfect man, right? No, you got to talk about the not so perfect things, because people are going to be like, you know what, I remember that, right? And they're going
Yeah.
to relate to it. And even people who don't know him are going to be like, dang, that sounds a lot like my dad, right? And so
Right.
it could really do something for, people who don't know how to find their voice, or, don't quite know how to express how they feel about, maybe their own family and things like that. So it's very helpful. So now that, hey, it's out there, you're doing releases and things like that, right? How does it feel, right? What's the feeling after, like, accomplishing this and getting everything out there? And now kind of, and you being, the shy person, now being kind of like the center of attention.
I'm still getting used to it, if that makes any sense. Yes, I'm much more confident in a lot of ways. Like I've been able to like, accomplish this, accomplish so many other things, like in terms of work too. But I think, you know, the stepping in front of the mic is still something that I'm still getting used to because, especially when you talk about such vulnerable things, like you're kind of like, are people going to be interested in this? Like, are they going to think this is too dark? Like, I think those were
Right.
the questions that would come up a lot for me when it came to like imposter syndrome and being like I'm about to publish these poems and they're like, they could be conceived as very dark poems, right? Like, not to say that I didn't talk about lighter things, but like some of them you're like, shit, like she was really going
Heavy.
through
Yeah.
it. Right. And so I think a lot of that, like I was scared. I would say in terms of like how do I feel? I still feel like it's surreal. Like I think it's just kind of like this actually came out of me. Like I can't
Right.
believe it. And I
Like it
think
hasn't hit yet. Yeah.
yeah, like it makes it more real when I talk to people that are like, I went through this too. Like I lost my dad and he was such a like important person in my life, but he, also had his demons and also was an alcoholic. And that's when I'm like this is why I wrote the book. Like this is why I wanted it to get out there, because I could have kept those poems. I couldn't, I could have just been like, nah, these are for me. It's fine.
Right.
But I think for me, it was more like, I know I needed a book like this for myself. So I think me deciding to publish them, it was more of, it came out of like, I'm sure someone else is going to need this book because there's not one like it. Like I genuinely feel like I couldn't find a book similar to this, and it was a reason why I wrote it.
Nice. Yeah. So, like, really quickly, I mean, I know there's not maybe a whole bunch of people that have been able to like maybe pre-order or anything like that, or maybe that went to the events. I mean, I'm sure you got like a good amount of people, right? What has been like the feedback so far that you've received from the book?
I've been getting a really positive feedback. It just in the sense of like people just telling me, I see myself in your poetry. Like now I want to write too, or like I should write too. And so I think I don't know. To me, that's the positivity of it. Like it's not even like the book sells for me. I think it's more of like, oh, like what impact did I create for someone else? And possibly like did I give like a tool for them to like also heal from their mother or father wounds? Because I would say like losing a parent is hard, and I just feel like no one really prepares you for it. And I don't even think there's a book, and I have read some books, but I feel like it's very like
Well, it's a
kind of,
unique experience, right? So you
yeah,
can't really like put it in in any one bucket and be like, that's the way you do it.
right. And I think it's been like very when I have read about grief, it's been very like walking on eggshells. And it's more like you should do this and you should do that. But I wasn't really looking for that. It was more of like connection with someone. So I think when I find connection with people due to publishing the book, I think that's for sure my win. My
Very
win.
cool. Yeah, sure. I like that. Now, I know I don't want you to give the whole thing away here, right? Obviously, but I want to see if maybe there's like a quick poem from your book that you'd be willing to share, for people listening that might want to check it out and maybe order it or anything like that. So if there's any one that you want to share out real quick.
Okay. Do you want like a sad one or do you want like a more lighthearted one?
I want whatever is a great example of what people can expect. So anything, it's up to you. Let's go with. I mean, if you got a deep cut one, that would be nice.
Okay. I think I'm gonna do Chiona.
Like the title already.
Yeah, there's a poem called Chiona. Because I'm a Chiona, as you can tell. Like I had to write, I cried while writing this book. But I also get really emotional quickly. And so this describes that, but it also connects it to my dad in a lot of ways. And this poem probably represents like kind of taking power in being emotional and not no longer letting it like be a negative thing. For sure.
All right, let's hear it.
Chiona. Yeah, this is Chiona. I've always been what my dad would call me every time I would cry. Una chillona. Mi familia always made me feel like it was a bad thing, and this made me believe it was a weakness, a flaw, and a bother. Quiere llorar, would regularly be repeated to me as tears dropped to my lap. I was the center of everyone's jokes because I was so quick to break during an argument. Didn't they notice I just needed someone's comfort to tell me that everything would be fine? I cried because the arguing made me nervous. I needed reassurance that I was not a disappointment for one single thing I had done wrong, not even crying. No one noticed that the tears were a river of my own to clear the emotions I felt when no one came to shine their warmth on me. Me sanaba con mis propias lágrimas, no me quedaba de otra. I at least had a way to release all the pressure. My dad, on the other hand, was constantly consumed in his own thoughts, never letting out his fears and emotions. He instead chose to sit with beers in hand to drown his sorrows, never telling us how he also needed reassurance to know everything would be okay, that he needed us to also be there to lift him up and did not need to carry everything on his own. After his death, I saw the strength in mis lágrimas because they showed me that all along, I was crying all the tears my dad couldn't.
Ooh, it's deep, and I think, I'm just listening and I'm, thinking of the parallels, that I've seen, growing up and things like that. And I think a lot of people that have grown up, similarly, right, they'll be like, dang, that hits right in the, in the feelings there because they've seen it too, know? So yeah, that's pretty cool. And if that's what people can expect, I think it's a really good read, right? I'm not for sure. Yeah. Listen, I am not a reader. When friend of mine now of the show, Larry Hankin, he's an actor. He's been in a lot of movies and TV and stuff. Like he wrote a book, he wrote a memoir. And I said, I do not read books. So I'm going to read your book. I want to read your book, right? I want to read your book and I want people to find it. Right. So I was wondering, how can people get a hold of this book?
So right now it's not available on digital platforms yet, but it should be like in, I want to say 2 to 3 weeks on digital platforms. By digital platforms, I mean Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Eventually it will be on there. It just takes a while to like process all those things. And so people should expect it by this year to be on Amazon and like other digital platforms like Barnes and Noble. But I am taking pre-orders, and pre-orders are pretty cool because I get to sign them for people.
Nice.
And you might have like extra little gift in there. And so I think if anybody's interested in buying my book before it's out on digital platforms, you can visit my Instagram, which is at writew.soul. And yeah, like it's on my bio, and you can find the place to pre-order.
All right, perfect. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask next. Next would be, where can people find you? But you pitched that perfectly, almost like a pro. Right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So anything else you want to throw out there about this process, about this book? Anything at all?
I'd say if you're interested in writing, just for anybody who's here listening to this, it might feel like it's not attainable. I don't know. I felt like it was not something I could do for many reasons, and for me, I think now I see it of like anybody could write, like literally anybody could write. What helped me get there was reading, of course, probably reading poetry, because that's what helped me. But finding a community of writers, or like someone who's already done it before. It doesn't necessarily have to be community, but a mentor always helps. But community definitely is so important if you actually want to like write to create a book. Mm-hmm. And so with that being said, I highly recommend finding your community of writers or person that can mentor you, so you can also get there and also publish your work. I just want to say, as a Latina, like, our stories matter. Mm-hmm. It might not seem like that like they do, but they do. And sometimes, we get so fixated, like, but my story doesn't look like that person's, or I don't come from money, or like, I don't come from money. So I think it's just important, like, if you feel like you have something to say and you want people to know your story, or even you feel like it would help others, like, just do it. Like, money does not matter in this situation, because with community, you can do it. And there's plenty of resources online too. So
all right. Yeah. Now, I wanted to think, I was thinking about a way, a nice way to end. And I just want you to, give me in like 5 to 6 words, right? Describe the man known as Chico, right? That was his nickname, Chico. Describe the man known as Chico in like 5, 6 words.
Well, my dad was un bailador, cantor, también le gustaba cocinar, cocinero, y un buen padre. Mm-hmm. I probably went over the 5 words already.
Hey, that's all right.
And then I would say very strict too, in a lot of ways. I think he had to be for 6 girls, right? 6 women.
Oh, I didn't even touch on that. I was like, can you imagine?
I come from, he has 6 girls. So I have 5 sisters. And so I think, growing up, I was like, why is my dad so strict? Like, why does he want to let us sleep over at a friend's house? I'm just like, now I know why. It wasn't so much that he wanted to treat us like little kids. Like, it was just like he knew the reality of the world, and it's more like a protection type of thing. Like, he was our dad, so he was protecting us. And so that was something else that I processed. Like, I saw him as a strict father, strict Mexican father, but really he wanted to protect us. So
there we go. Understanding through understanding. There we go.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, Solany, again, I really appreciate it. I want to thank you for being on, and definitely wish you the best of luck. And whether I do the pre-order or the digital, I'm gonna be reading that some way or another, right? And I hope others do too.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. Sure. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's my first podcast, so props to you, because you made me feel super comfortable.
For sure. Yeah. So thank you again, and for everyone listening at home, I appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck you and good night. subscribe to the Ignorance is Strength podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.